Yeah, so yesterday we did abstraction. Today, what we're going to do is encapsulation. All right. So, okay. So, encapsulation is also one of the OOPS concepts. The other three are inheritance, polymorphism, and abstraction. We did abstraction yesterday. Today, we are moving on to doing encapsulation. It's comparatively pretty easy. It's not that difficult. So what the definition says is encapsulation is the mechanism of wrapping data, which is variables, and the code acting on the data. So excuse me, wait for a second. Yeah. So encapsulation is the mechanism of wrapping the data variables and the code acting on the data, which is a method. So it wraps your variables and your methods together as a single unit. So what does encapsulation mean? It will wrap your data, which is your variables, and your methods in a single unit. In encapsulation, the variables of a class will be hidden from other classes and can be accessed only through the methods of their current class. So the variables will always be private. According to encapsulation, your variables will be private and they will be hidden from the other methods and other classes in your project, and they can only be accessed through the methods of the class in which the variables are present. We'll see it in the example. I think it will be more clear that way, and it is the technique of doing that, the making variables hidden from other classes and being accessible only through the methods, that is called data hiding. It's called data hiding. So to achieve encapsulation in Java, declare the variables of the class as private and provide public setter and getter methods to modify and view the variable values. So what we're going to do is, what encapsulation does it, you make a class, you make a separate class. See, this is a public class and they've just named it encap test, you can name it whatever, and you make all the variables private. You make all the variables private and then you make these setter and getter methods. Now setter and getter methods are nothing different, they are normal methods, but we just call them setter and getter, just a way of writing it. So this get age could have been named anything else, but we name it get age because it is like a convention. People, like, this is how they've, like, all the coders kind of write it, so that it's like every, if some other coder reads your code, so it's also they can understand it. There's no, like, your code will still run if you do not name it get age and set age and name it something else. But we do it this way because it's just a convention of how do encapsulation. And because we name them as get age and set age and get name and set name, so we've ended up calling them the getter and setter methods. So what they do, what these are used for, you make a separate class for encapsulation. This is a separate class, and you provide all the variables over here, and you make them private. And then you make these public methods. So public methods are available to all the classes. I hope now you know what public, private, and abstract and all those do. So private, these are present only in this incap test class. These are not present outside the incap test class, but these public methods are present in this class and outside this class and everywhere. So through these public methods, now we will set the age and we can get the age. So we will not use these variables in our program. We will be using these functions every time we need the value, or we need to set the value, or we need to get the value. We will be calling these methods by creating an object of this class. All right, like we've made this whole setter getter thing. Now we need it, so we'll make an object. We made this object. See, we made this object, and through this we said incap dot set name James dot set age 20 dot set ID this, and then we printed it and we used incap dot get name dot get age, and the output was name was James and age was 20. And the benefit is the field of class can be made read only. Now if you Okay, I'll move on to that later. But tell me, did you understand this part? Did you understand this? Did you understand what was happening over here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, no problem. I think this is comparatively easy. If you have any problem, then let me know. I will explain it once more if you want. If anybody has any problem, you can ask me. I will explain it once more. No? Okay. Okay. So, as none of you have a problem, so we move on to the benefits. The benefit is if you want, you can make certain variables read only or write only. How you can do it? The get method is used to read the value. Every time you want the value, you want to read the value, want to use the value, use the get method, the get name or the get age or whatever. And to write the value, to change the value, we use the set method. Now if we want age to not change, if we want age like the, in later in the program, we do not want anywhere to change the value of age, so we will just not write the set age method. If we remove the set age, we cannot change the value of age now, right? Or if we want the value of age to never be read, we want no, like none of the class to ever be able to get the value of age, so we'll just not make this get age method. That way age could only be written but it can never be called. Are you understanding what I'm saying? So using this, you can handle, you can make, the program a certain variables read only or write only. You can manage that using this method. And you can, a class can have total control over what is stored in its field, so you can like control everything you want, so you get a better control on how data is manipulated in a program. And even it's easier this way. You only need to make changes in one place and then it can be shown in the whole, like you can use the values everywhere you want. So I think encapsulation is clear now. I hope you understand what encapsulation is. Any doubts?
No, ma'am.
Okay. The benefits? See, the main benefit that I want you all to remember is that you can make, yeah, that you can make certain variables read only or write only. What does read only means? Read only means that they can only be used, like the value can only be used but the value can never be changed. And write only means that you can only change the value but can never use the value, you cannot read the value, you cannot use that value. So to do that, you can either, remove the set method, because set method is used to change the value. If you remove the set method, then you cannot change the value of age anymore. You can only read the value of age, you cannot write the value of age. And to make it only, write only and don't want to let it read, so you just remove the get method, and now you cannot get the value of age, you can only set it, you can only write it, you cannot read it. Okay. Okay, so now we will first, let's move on to our tic-tac-toe project first, right? Another thing, if somebody else is also using VS Code to run your Java programs, I don't know why I keep on getting problem in the terminal and it keeps on showing me like weird errors where it never doesn't show any output. So I've like, the better way, like just to get over that problem, I cannot figure out how to fix it. So if you're facing that kind of problem, you can just use your normal terminal, the command line of your, of the computer, rather than using the terminal present in VS Code. So that's what I have ended up doing because it was just throwing errors. Like even yesterday when it was not working, I think there's something wrong with the VS Code or how I've set it up. I don't know. So if you face a similar problem, you can also use your own command line to do it. Now, what we had done was we had displayed the board. We have got to a point where the user will enter a number, and according to that number you will display an X at the position that the user asked you to do. Oh yes, I asked you guys if anybody can do, ask the user again and again if they want to do it again. Was anybody able to do it? Did anybody do that? I asked you if anybody would be able to do it. That would be really cool. Where, you know you did it. Can you share your screen? Can you let me know if you can share your screen so I'll stop sharing mine? Okay, wait, I'll just stop sharing mine. Yeah, run your program once. Perfect, perfect, very good. So, can you once explain to the class how you did it? Because did anybody else do it? Was anybody else able to do it? No? Okay. So, just explain it once how you did it so that everybody else now knows how to do it. And by yesterday, I suppose that all of you will also implement things.
Yes, ma'am. Um, Only I use that do while whatever task we are repeated, it is we place in do, and which is first a character. First we declare a character. After that, I scan that character. After that, we just place in a while, and it gives to the do. If y will be printed, then it run the loop again, and it will or it n will be printed. Then we go out of loop. That's it.
Okay, okay, perfect. You can stop sharing a screen now. I'll move ahead. Okay. Yes. So we've reached there. Now what we want to do is wait first, let me run this. See, so what till where we you guys had done like what I asked you to do yesterday was you print the board, you asked them to choose a number from 1 to 9. Let's say they chose 7. So it would print an X at 7, but you see now it's not formatted properly. This is where the first board ends, then there's this is second board where you see this O has also been placed. This O is the computer's turn. This O is the computer's turn. So see, this O is over there. Let me do it. Let me format it a bit better. Wait a second. So let's say come over here and then we print. This is simple. Okay, so print viewers. Forgot the semicolon. See, let's do a 7 again. And see, so this is where the user chose 7 and it printed 7 over here. And now this is where the computer placed the marker. So this is what we're going to work on today. We're gonna give a turn to our computer. So after the user takes the turn, there needs to be the computer's turn and it should show this way. So for that, what we're going to do is you made this method, right? Where you had game board and you gave to where did we do? Yeah, we gave it game board and we gave it a position. Today we're going to give it a new. I'm so sorry. Yeah, we're going to give it a new argument, which is going to be user. Sorry. So yeah. Now this user will determine is it the turn of your player or is it the turn of your CPU, which is a computer. You can call it whatever. You call it computer, call it give it a name, player 2, player 1, or whatever you want. And this is going to be that. Okay. So you add this extra string user and then you come inside and you make this. You make a char symbol and declare it empty. This is like an empty character, a single space. This is a single space over here, if you can see this. Okay, and according to the player, we're going to set the symbol to either X or O. So we have given X to the player. So if user dot equals player, why user dot equals? Because this is a string. If user dot equals player, the symbol should be X. Else, if user dot equals CPU, the symbol should be O. So we use this to set the symbol, and then instead of putting the X over here, we just wrote symbol. So whatever symbol got chosen, like if it's the player, then this will become X, and if this is the CPU, it will become O. Did you guys understand this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we added this extra string user, and then we made this symbol. And if the user was player, the symbol was X. If the user was CPU, the symbol became O. Now how you will call this? Come back up. You need to make a change over here. Where you said place mark game board position, you need to add this extra player. Because first after this part, after you make the user enter an integer, first it will be the player's turn, right? First it will be the player's turn. So you call game board position and player. After that, to give CPU a turn, what we will do is we're going to create a random number between 9 till like 1 to 9. We need a random integer, right? From 1 to 9. And that integer we will be sending over to this place marker with the CPU. So we want to get a random number, what do? We say random rand is equals to new random. This is uh, another, like how we use scanner, a library. This is another, you know, library random, which is also in util. So you write java.util.random, and you use this random to create random numbers. You can create random decimals. You can create a lot of things. We just care about the integer. Okay. So, and how this works is you write how you write scanner s is equals to new scanner system.n. We write random and give it whatever name. This could be whatever you want, equals to new random, and don't need to give anything over here. And now we can take an integer and call it CPU position and say rand dot next int and say 9. And I'll tell you why we're doing a plus 1. We say 9. So this will create a random integer bit from 1 to 8. It creates a random integer from 1 to 8. It creates a random number from whatever number we give minus 1. So we gave it a plus 1 because we want a random number from 1 to 9. Right? We want a random number from 1 to 9. So it will give you a random number, and then you can call the place marker again, and you send game board CPU position now instead of the position, and you say CPU. So it will print a O at whatever random integer got chosen over here, and then it will work perfectly. Did you understand what you need to do? Did you understand, or did you got confused? You understood it. Okay, great. No, for you did not understand it, or no, for yes, I understood it. Like, you want me to go over it once more? We do not understand it. Okay. Why do you guys prefer to type? You can just unmute yourself and tell me what you did not understand. So it becomes more easy. I'll just do it over here. See, you will add another over here. You will add a string user. Okay. And now I'm just copying it from here because it's better. Just copy this. Still 3, right? All right. So position. Did you understand this part? Or did you not even understand this part?
Yes, ma'am.
You
And
understood it. All
the
right. Okay. So once you've got this, now you added this extra user, right? So you come over here after this part where you've taken your input from your user. You need to call the place marker, right? For the user first. Whose turn is it first? First, it's the user turn. So you send over here player. That means over here, what it's going to get player, it will check if user equals player. Yes, it equals player. So it will print an X. If this would have been CPU, it would have printed an O. So now the player's turn is done. The compiler comes back over here after doing all of this. And now we're going to get a random number from 1 to 9, a random number, and that's going to be the CPU's turn. So for the CPU's turn, you cannot ask the computer to choose a number. We're going to just get a random number from 1 to 9, and at that position, we are going to print the O. So how are we going to get the random number? We will use this. We'll do random rand is equals to new random. Now this is like how we use scanner. This is also already defined in Java, and it's java.util.random. How we use java.util.scanner, it's same. It's a java.util.random, and this is how you declare it. After doing this, we'll take another integer. How we took integer position for the player, we'll take integer CPU position, and we'll write rand dot next int 9. I'm going to do a +1. Alright? It will create a random number from 1 to 8, and then we just add 1 to it, so we'll get the, so that we get like a more, it just becomes way more randomized, like just letting it choose number between 1 to 10, like 1 to 9 that way. So we just add a 1 so that we get a random number, and then we'll call place mark again. We call place mark game board. Now this position is going to be, it's going to be CPU position. And the user, what will be the user? The user will be CPU. I need to save this. Do you get it now? So it is just going to, it's the same thing how we call this, we're calling this. Here we gave the position which the user entered and we said player. Here we are giving CPU position, which is a random number from 1 to 9, and we will give CPU. Rest all is the same.
Ma'am, how we know that CPU works and how it works?
What thing works?
How computer works? I didn't understand that.
The computer is not doing anything. It's same, it's a code. You can not name it CPU and just name it whatever you want. You're doing the same. It's nothing different. Me saying CPU doesn't mean the CPU gets a turn. Okay, I'll do one thing. I'll name it. I'll do this. I'll call it Vani over here, and I'll give Vani over here, and this becomes from CPU position. This becomes to Vani position, and this also becomes that, and this will still work. It doesn't mean the CPU is taking a turn. The only thing that changed, it's nothing. Okay, just think of it as a way you called this method once to, print the board with an X, right? You're calling this method to print the board with an X, right? So once the board has been printed with an X, now you need to print it again with an O, with O placed somewhere. But for the second turn, you, like, the user has taken a turn. Now you need to make a move. The computer means you yourself. You are writing the code. You are the computer part over here. So now it's your turn. So how do you do it? You take a random number. This is how it works. We chose a random number with the random this library over here, the random library. What you can do it, you can choose, it will just give a random number from 1 to 9, whatever you declare over here. So we did a 9, which will be 1 to 8 plus 1. So it will just give a random number from 1 to 9. It can be 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. So just choose a random number for you, which we store in this variable, and then we call the same way we were doing this here. What's the difference? The difference is this position. This position was entered by the user. We asked the user to enter a number and we were sending that number. For this position, we are creating a random number. We are creating a random number and we are just sending that random number over. Rest all is the same. The CPU does not do anything. It's the same thing. Over here, just the difference in both of these is here we were sending the position which the user entered, and here we are sending the position which we got from this random number. That's it. The CPU does not do anything. Don't think of it as the computer is actually making a move. No, this is all code.
Okay.
Did you understand? Did you get it or did you not get it? If you did not, I will try explaining it in a different way.
No, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, don't confuse it like that. For coding, you are the computer. Whatever you tell the computer to do, it will do it. The computer will never do something itself. And this is, I hope you understood this, and I want you all by tomorrow to be finished by this part. I want you all to be done with the user making a move, and after that the computer making a move, and then till there. Any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. So now we have time, so I'll explain constructors, and once you're done with it, That would be it for the day. Yeah, so yesterday we came across constructor and I realized that we have not done it. So a constructor is, you can say, it's similar to a method like the way you write it, but it's different. Okay, a constructor is a block of code similar to method. It is called when an instance of the class is created. And when is an instance of a class created? When you create an object. When you write the class name obj is equals to new class something, that's when the constructor is called. When you just write that line, the computer straight away goes to the constructor. But now you'll think we've used that. We've used, the class name and we made an object of a class, but we never used constructor. So where is the compiler going to? The code itself compile. There's a default constructor that if you do not write a constructor, the compiler will make constructor itself, and that is called a default constructor. All right, so if you do not create a constructor yourself, a default constructor will be made. And so that's why every time you create an object, the default constructor is called, which is not visible to you. But if you want, you can make a constructor yourself in the code if needed. So how do we make it? The rule is the constructor's name should be same as the class name. So let's say you have a class test, then your constructor's name will also be test. Constructor must have no explicit return type. It will not return anything. Methods can return value. A constructor will not return a value. Java constructor cannot be abstract, static, final. You do not give anything. You just name the constructor. There's no, public static and nothing. You don't use anything with that. So there's a default constructor which takes no arguments. No arguments mean anything that in the bracket. These are arguments. These are arguments. So a default construction does not have any arguments. And then we have a parameterized constructor which has arguments. Okay. So a default constructor is something like this. See, you have class bike1. So you just write bike1, make these two brackets, and then you have curly brackets. Let me write it over here. It's like weirdly formatted. I don't know why. I don't know why they do that. Let's see, you have this class tic-tac-toe demo. So you can, to make a constructor, this is a default constructor, how you would do it, tic-tac-toe demo, and this is it. This is a default constructor. You have no parameter over here, and you can just write this system dot. You can do whatever. You can write a system.out.print if you want, and print constructor. Do something like this. So this is your default constructor which has no parameters or anything. This name should be same as a class name. That if these things are same, that means it is a constructor. It just realizes that this is a constructor. And now whenever it will be called, see, they're calling this class, they made this object, this constructor will be called. So when they did this, bike is created was printed because the constructor was printing bike is created. Do you understand this?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. So now,
Hello, ma'am.
yes.
Ma'am, my doubt is where are the OPs are used mostly? Means in high code projects or generally we can we use these OPs in our normal programs also?
The object-oriented concept, these concepts,
Yes, ma'am.
you can use them. You can use them in whatever. This is the best practice, the best way of writing, your Java code. But it's not like defined. If you want to use it in your normal codes, you can use these. Nobody's stopping you. But usually we just skip that part because in normal, your small programs, they themselves like very fast because it's like very less code and it doesn't do anything much. So if you want to use encapsulation, abstraction and everything, that is like the best thing you can do. But they usually people put more effort into using all the oops concept in larger codes, because in like a, let's say, an Android application, it has so much going on. So if you do not use this concept, it's going to lag and like take so much of time to do whatever is needed. So that's where you will see it generally. If you make only one class, if you're writing all of your code only in the main method and you only have one class, in that case using these, it's good if you can use it, but if you do not use it, it doesn't make any like much of a difference. But it is good practice, so it is not like defined you need to use it here and do not need to use somewhere else. You can use it wherever you want.
Yes, ma'am.
And to use these, the major thing is you will need a lot of practice, so that while you're writing code you will like instantly realize, okay, I need to do this now, I need to do this. And how does it happen? When you write as much code as you can. Now the default constructors, or any constructor, the main thing it is used for is to giving values, or like to default constructor displays the default values to get default values to your all the variables in your class. So these are your class variables, right? This is in this class, this is not inside the main method or any method in tidy and string name. So this will be available in the whole of the class. So what is the default constructor used for? It is used to give a default value to these variables. Right now they have no value, right? You gave nothing. So when the compiler calls this, what is it going to store? When it will come over here in class 3, student 3, it will come over here, it will read string ID, it will make space for string ID, but there is nothing inside string ID, so how will it give it space? So the default constructor, what it does, it gives a default value. What default value will give it? Whatever is the default value for that data type. So they've done a print with the ID and name over here in the constructor, so that you can see what value it is giving it. Okay, this is your default constructor. I'm sorry, this is not your constructor. They are just this is just a method for displaying the values. Okay, and when they called this, they did not make the constructor, they're showing the default constructor which is automatically created. So they called S1 and they called S2 and they printed the value of this, but then nowhere in the program you can see that they gave any value to the data, right? I hope you can see that nowhere in the complete program they never wrote ID equals to something or name equals to something. They just printed ID name. And what they got as a result was a zero and null, because the default value for integer is zero and default value for string is null. So where did these values come from? From the default constructor. When this was written, the first thing that happened was it went to the default constructor, as there was no constructor written by us or by the coder. It went to the default constructor, which is just present over there. You do not see it. And what does that do is it gives these the default value. So over there, it gave ID the value of zero and name the value of null. I hope you understood that. It's not that crazy difficult. If you think you've understood a bit and getting a bit lost, uh, either you ask me right now, you can just go to the site. This is Java T point, and just go to Java T point Java constructor. Read it once. It's not that difficult. It's pretty easy. Now we'll move on to parameterized constructor. Now what a parameterized? If you want to give your variables a default value yourself, let's say when you do not make this constructor, it will just give a default, it will give ID the value 0 and name the value null. But you don't want that. You want that if for some reason in your code ID was never given a value or name was never given a value, you do not want 0 or null being printed. You want a certain value. Let's say if a value was never given to ID, we still want to print 111, or we want to print something else. That's when you can use your parameterized constructor. So we had this class student 4 and we made this constructor student 4 and gave it int I and string n, and inside we wrote id equals to I and name equals to n. So we gave value to these. So now when we created when we created the object, we need to send these value. We cannot skip this now, because the first thing it will do is it will go to the constructor. So the student 4, when we write the student 4 and these brackets, we use brackets with methods, right? Every time we call our methods like display, we use these brackets, right? But we were using also these brackets to call this class. We were never calling the class. This never calls your class. What does it call? It calls your constructor. This thing, this is calling your constructor. It is not calling your class. Remember that. This is calling your constructor. So when you write this and a constructor takes an integer and a string, so you need to give an integer and a string. And we did it again. We made another, this is S1, this is S2. These both are different objects. So another object where we wrote, 2 to 2 and array, and we did s1 dot display and s2 dot display. So s1 dot display will print these values and s2 dot display will print these values. Are you understanding this?
Ma'am, how can you
Yes.
say that that new student 4 is calling to uh, this student 4 int and not to class student 4?
Because first of all, how I can say, because that's what is happening. When you say student 4 and you give these brackets and you give these values, if let's say it was calling the class, where is this value going? Then where is this value going? There's nowhere where the value will go. When you send these values, when you write these values, what do you understand? That when this thing, whatever this thing is being called, these values must be accepted. And where are these values being accepted? They're being accepted over here. And we just now we talked about, like, every time this is created, what it goes to is the default constructor if there's no constructor, and it goes to a parameterized or the constructor that you created. These brackets, these round brackets, right, which we even put after your display, these are associated with the methods and your constructors only. You never, why? Because see, you put these round brackets over here, you write display and these give these round brackets, and we are using these round brackets over here. We write student 4 and we see we have these round brackets, we're using these round brackets over here. We use the box brackets with the array because when we are declaring array, we use the box brackets. What do we use after class? We use these curly brackets, right? This is the easiest way to remember it. We use these curly brackets. We are not using the curly brackets over here. How does it know that it needs to call this? There are two. When we see the student 4, there are two student 4s over here. One is the class and one is the constructor, right? But then it sees that there are these round brackets and there's even this integer and a string. So which of the two is accepting an integer and a string and has round brackets? The constructor does. It's asking for an integer and a string. It is asking for it. And it even has those round brackets. So that's why it calls the constructor. And this is how it works. It's not like this time it is calling the constructor, some other time it will be calling something else. It will always go to the constructor. If there is no constructor over here, it will go to the default constructor. It never goes to the, like, it doesn't go straight over here. It goes to the constructor and then it continues from there. So that is
Yes,
how it
ma'am, understood.
works. Yeah. Easiest way to remember is it just check what is being called and what is being done. So you say student 4, you give this bracket, you give these value. So where is student 4 with brackets and values? It is over here. And what is this? This is your constructor. So it's calling that. And you cannot have anything else having the same name as your class. Only your constructor can have this. If you make a void student 4, that will throw an error. That you cannot do that. Only your constructor can have this. Okay. And so this is it for your constructors. If you have any doubt, you can ask me. And this is it for the class 2. You all know what your task is. You need to complete, like, move, do more of the coding in your tic-tac-toe game and reach till that point. Tomorrow we're going to do the rest of it, and we will do polymorphism. We did abstraction, we did encapsulation, now we'll do polymorphism. Okay? If you have any doubt, you can ask me or you can start leaving the class.